for this next portion, I'm going to be talking specifically about the main characters and a few of the minor characters in the series. And I'm going to be mostly talking about a lot of important moments in those characters' portrayal throughout the series. So that's going to involve a little bit of spoiler for some of you out there that may not have gotten as far into the story as I have. So I'm just putting it out there right now that this is the point where you want to stop. But I don't think, at this point anyway, in my talking about Bleach, that I'm going to reveal anything that's too big of a spoiler where you won't enjoy the story as it is, which is why it's still in this portion and not in the next portion, which I'll get into at the end of this video. So now let's begin talking about the characters of our story, as they are the most important parts of any series.
Ichigo Kurosaki is the main focus of the series, and he can seem sort of bland when the story gets past the 8th volume. He did go through some great character development in the early volumes, probably to lay down some groundwork for the series. He's brash and impetuous, but he values his friends more than anyone else in the world. He also does have some fantasies, but he never actually tries to move forward with his feelings with any of the girls in the series. In the beginning, he was only into the Soul Reaper gig to save and protect his family, and didn't really want to shoulder the responsibility of always going after Hollow. It was through Rukia's pep talks that Ichigo realizes that you have to commit to protecting everyone or no one, or else you just become a hypocrite. This is the point where Ichigo comes into himself to realize his potential as a Soul Reaper and take it seriously. Volume 3 is a great one for Ichigo, where he learns that he blames himself for causing the death of his mother. He says he saw a little girl, being too young to understand that he was actually seeing a ghost and not a real person at the time, and ran after her. Ichigo then woke up seeing his mom dead next to him. Ichigo believing that she was hit by a car or a bus and died, and all because of him and his curse. Later, though, we learn that the death of his mother was actually caused by a hollow known as Grand Fissure, a hollow that can modify the appendage hanging off his head to look like a human ghost to lure people to him that have a lot of spirit energy, which are only ones that see the lure, sort of the same principle as an angler fish. Learning this, Ichigo takes it upon himself to defeat Grand Fissure, believing it will give him closure and redemption by killing his mother's killer. This works against him, though, as he is too hot-headed to fight well, and the battle ends with Ichigo too damaged to move and Grand Fissure slinking away. I thought this was great and is probably the best character moment for him right now. Next we have Rukia. She is by far the strongest female character in the series. She is initially sort of a Obi-Wan to Ichigo's Luke, but I think they have far more of a mutual respect for each other, in that oftentimes Rukia is as much in the dark about what's going on in a situation as Ichigo is. She is more gung-ho than Ichigo, and I guess because she has lived in Soul Society for so long, she has some quirky moments where she says or does the wrong thing, not understanding the norms of the living world. She is pretty well established early on in just a few chapters, but Kubo did leave a few Easter eggs here and there for things to come in relation to her initial reaction to Ichigo, as though she'd seen a ghost. Ha, ghost. Or later when Ichigo is fighting Grand Fissure and she remembers a quote about there being two kinds of battles, convincing her not to meddle with Ichigo's fight. Both of these are explained in greater detail further down the line, when it's revealed that Rukia was a Soul Reaper in training, and that she fought alongside an assistant captain, Kain, who looks and acts an awful lot like Ichigo. Kain gets into a fight and becomes possessed by the Hollow, and Rukia has to kill Kain's possessed body so he doesn't infect other Soul Reapers. This was a great insight into her character because it explains her actions at the Grand Fissure fight, as Ichigo is fighting to avenge the death of his mother the same way Kain was fighting to avenge the death of his wife. Rukia also has a funny character quirk of being terrible at drawing, especially when drawing diagrams when she's supposed to be explaining a phenomenon of some sort. For me, character quirks are an important tool for lightening the mood of a story and making the character more lovable and relatable, as well as having some sort of flaw or obsession. Next up, Orihime is a bit more odd. Initially, she had a lot of character. Granted, she wasn't in the fray, fighting as much as the other guys, but she was still helpful in rounding out the cast with her bubbly personality and her eager altruism that is only rivaled by that of Ichigo. Orihime's character had a lot to do with her relationship with her brother and her friend Tatsuki. Her brother was very kind to her, and I suppose shapes much of how she acts. It is her relationship with Tatsuki, though, that cemented her strive to want to protect her friends, as Tatsuki would often stick up for her when she was bullied, and it's the person that makes her the friend she is now. However, once the Arrancar arc starts in 21, a lot of this feels like it gets pushed aside. She becomes more helpless and less independent about saving herself from her captors. There is definitely a similarity with Rukia in this case, as she was less characteristic while she was imprisoned in Soul Society. However, I could forgive it with Rukia because she had some legitimate emotional baggage, and I could feel that maybe she was just wanting to pay for her crimes as a way to come to terms with her guilt. Of course, this is a very depressing look at it, but I can at least draw a line of logic to it as opposed to Orihime, who is complacent to the Arrancars because she's a damsel in distress for this portion of the arc. Chad is also an interesting character in the fact that he is Hispanic, which doesn't come up often in anime and manga. He is a strong silent type with the quirk that he loves cute things. He has a strong sense of responsibility for protecting his friends, as explained in a flashback that he used to beat up people as a kid, because he could given his size and build. His grandfather then explained to him that he should use his fists for protecting others instead of fighting. He also has a strong friendship with Ichigo following an incident with some bullies where they took a sentimental medallion from him, and Ichigo went out of his way to get it back for him since Chad didn't like fighting. Chad really doesn't get any more development following this, and he's put mostly in the background to whatever is going on. He's sort of like Worf from Star Trek Next Generation, and I don't mean in the racist way. He's the character that his defining trait is that he's really strong. He goes in and gets trampled by an opponent to show the audience that this isn't some minor threat. Like, just when Chad gets an enhancement for his superpowers, he's immediately come across by an enemy that is way out of his league, and he is put out of commission. Now, Uryu is the last of the minor characters following Ichigo. Uryu is also really well defined and works perfectly as a foil to Ichigo. He always keeps his cool and oftentimes has to outwit his opponent to defeat him. Uryu is a Quincy, which is a dissenting faction of spirit fighters, similar to Soul Reapers, but with a different ideology about how to eliminate hollows should be done. Uryu is also the last of the Quincies, and the Soul Reapers wiped them out over the course of hundreds of years, giving Uryu an understandable chip on his shoulder towards Ichigo. It is through interacting with Ichigo, though, that he learns he should put the past behind him like his grandfather did and try to be friends with Ichigo instead of hating him for something that was never his fault. Uryu also has probably the funniest quirks of the characters in the series, in that he's obsessed with sewing, which works well into the story and how Uryu will often have new outfits for the characters when they get torn up and need fixing. The rest of the characters fall into very one-dimensional territory, as very little is done for their progression, or has just been introduced in the story and haven't fully developed yet. The captains in Soul Society are probably the best in that all of them gel well with each other, and it doesn't feel like they are cookie-cutter characters at any time. Some of these, such as Hitsuguya, Renji, Ikaku, and Kenpachi, have gotten some character development, but not enough as of yet to really be more than an in-and-out character for a chapter or two when they are in a fight. Urahara and Kon are two characters that are developed, but sorta are used for plot convenience. Urahara is a former scientist for Soul Society, so he knows how to get the characters to various spiritual planes as they need to get to it for several MacGuffins in the plot. I like him in the way that he's a crazy old guy and is wise beyond his years, like Mr. Miyagi or Master Roshi. Kon was an interesting character in the beginning, but it quickly is apparent that his existence is that of plot explanation. He is a spirit, and his job is to inhabit Ichigo's body while he is a Soul Reaper, so his body isn't just laying limp in the street or in his room for hours and hours. When Kon isn't in Ichigo's body, it's in that of a stuffed bear, which he can move around in, which just seemed to be a cheap ploy at marketing. This really only leaves the character that Ichigo and his friends run into school as the last ones to mention. At first I liked them and was willing to sit through what they had to say, but as the story became less and less involved with them in the plot, I really found their inclusion as a jarring break from the plot, since the reader knows nothing they will do or say will have any effect on what's going on in the long run.